Today's conversation is going to be about kingdom justice and what that actually is, and the importance that justice plays in every single society, every single government and nation, or every single gathering of human beings. Justice is so important. I'll go as far as to say heaven can't come on earth without justice in place. Okay? So important. So, every territory, every sphere is subject to governing rules or governing policy or governing frameworks such as laws, policies, and culture. We have to understand that the kingdom of heaven is no different. The kingdom of heaven literally is the governmental system of heaven itself, and it's no different. And to be honest with you, it is from that government that we get the institutions and the civilizational structures that we have today in our world. The truth of the matter is that because of the fall, these institutions have been warped and they have been corrupted. But mankind was seeded with governance and seeded with civilization. As a result, the governmental system of heaven has its own framework. Our desire is to return the kingdom and its frameworks into the public square, in particular in the arena of justice. It's got to come back. We have other ideologies in its place, and it's causing such a mess politically, socially. It's causing such a mess. It's now time for the kingdom to be restored back to the marketplace. So important. In the book of Isaiah, the prophetic writings of this Hebrew prophet, in chapter 59, it describes a nation that is in trouble. It's in moral decay, a civilization that has gone its own way, and the implications of this. And we're just going to read just a few verses of that particular scripture um, that Isaiah wrote, which was a prophetic critique of the time. And what you'll find is that prophetic critique of that particular time is very much similar to the prophetic critique of where we are today, in particular in the West. Now, before we do that, we need to understand something about the kingdom and its frameworks. It's not strange, right? That the first five books of the Bible are known as the law, it's known as the Torah. And within the Torah, God begins to reveal his frameworks, his governing frameworks that cover every area of human life. And whether you like it or not, all of us do live under governing policy. We do live under law, statutes, and decrees. Okay, whether we like it or not, it's absolute the truth. We are not free to do what we want to do. And one of the things that we get deceived with, especially in the West, is that we live in a free society. No, you don't. You live in a society that is governed by law. And the truth of the matter is, if we're going to get a return back to justice, we're going to have to look at the laws and the legal frameworks that currently exist in our respective nations. Now, ancient Israel was no different. And the Torah was God breathed frameworks where the prophetic became policy, where the prophetic became law, okay, and prophetic became statutes. And those statutes were given so that they could administrate justice within that given territory of Israel, or given in that given territory called that particular nation. So important to understand how important justice is to the heart of God. So let's just get back to Isaiah's prophetic critique of the nation and of the times he was living in. I'm just going to read from Isaiah chapter 59, and we're just going to read a few verses. It says, "No one calls for justice. No one pleads a case with integrity. They rely on empty arguments. They utter lies. They conceive trouble and give birth to evil. They hatch the eggs of vipers and spin a spider's web. Whoever eats their eggs will die, and when one is broken, an adder is hatched. Their cobwebs are useless for clothing. They cannot cover themselves with what they make. Their deeds are evil deeds, and acts of violence are in their hands. Their feet rush into sin, and they are swift to shed innocent blood. Abortion, anyone? They pursue evil schemes. Acts of violence mark their ways. He's describing his society. The way of peace they do not know. There is no justice in their paths. They have turned them into crooked roads. No one who walks along them will know peace. And look at this critique. So justice is far from us, and righteousness does not reach us. We look for light, but all is darkness, for brightness, but we walk in deep shadows. Like the blind, we grope along the wall, feeling our way, like people without eyes. At midday, we stumble as if it were twilight. Among the strong, we are like the dead. Last verse 11 says, we all growl like bears. We moan mournfully like doves. We look for justice and find none, for deliverance, but it is far away. Wow, what a prophetic critique of his society and the civilization that he was living in at the time. The question is, how does a nation get into this condition? That same critique answers the question. Further verses actually reads this. Just hear this out. So justice is driven back, and righteousness stands at a distance. Truth has stumbled in the streets, and honesty cannot enter. And verse 15 says, truth is nowhere to be found, and whoever shuns evil becomes a prey. The Lord looked and was displeased that there was no justice. You want to know what happened in Isaiah's time and in terms of what's happening in our time? Truth, objective truth. The truth revealed, objective truth revealed in the frameworks of the kingdom has stumbled in the public square. We now have a insidious philosophy that has replaced truth. And in the West, we're suffering from it right now. Postmodernism, secular humanism. And if you look at that, those two ideologies in particular, there is no objective truth. Truth is no longer objective. It is subjective. And as a result, this malaise has seeped into our society, seeped into our civilization. And now we're finding it is seeped into our judicial systems also. And this is the reasons why people are escaping justice. More on that a little bit later. But as a result of truth being replaced, as a result of truth stumbling in the streets, it means there is no justice. There is a direct relationship between truth and justice. Let me just give you a quick definition of the word justice. It is the executive, legislative, and judicial process of upholding just laws. According to the revealed scriptures, justice is used as a measurement when God is looking and judging nations and whole cities. It's important to understand this. As a prophetic community, we're very much used to judgment. We say the word about judgment all the time. But the criteria that God is looking at in our nations isn't necessarily how good we are. He is looking at how justice is being implemented in these regions, your region and in my region. Justice is important to the Lord. According to Isaiah chapter 28, verse 17, same prophet, God makes a tremendous declaration. He says, I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the plumb line. I'll say that again. I will make justice the measuring line and righteousness the plumb line. It's important to understand that the Lord uses justice as a measuring line and righteousness as a plumb line. What does that mean? God is using construction, analogies or metaphors taken from the world of construction to give us insight in terms of how he measures nations and cities and families and individuals. You want to know what it is? It's called a measuring line and a plumb line. Let's have a look at a measuring line and its use in the world of construction. Well, a measuring line back then and even now is an instrument, a measuring instrument that is used to measure buildings in the process of construction. It measures lines or takes measurements horizontally. Okay. So most buildings, you need a blueprint and you have measurements that are both vertical and horizontal. So the measuring line measures buildings horizontally, whereas a plumb line is slightly different. It is literally a weighted measuring line. It's just a piece of metal right at the end. And what it does is make sure that when you're measuring something vertically, that it's 100% vertical. And this is what the ancient builders used to use to measure their buildings, to make sure they were building according to the blueprint. You catching this? According to the blueprint. So when it comes to justice, God uses a measuring line. When it comes to righteousness, he uses a plumb line. Either way, these instruments are used to measure nations, measure cities. And the truth of the matter is what we've got to understand. But God is using his standards, not subjective standards, not the standards that we've come up with, not the standards that our culture demands. No, no, no. It's his standards. Do we measure up? Well, this in mind, let's look at the recent controversies that we've seen. In the United States, there's been the release of the Epstein files, grotesque crimes against children, grotesque. And similarly, over here in the United Kingdom, we have had our issues with pedophilia. In particular, the latest manifestation of this is the grooming gang scandals that's taken place right here, where pedophilia has taken on an industrial scale, where British young girls are being raped and abused by foreign men of Pakistani origin, but are raping these girls in an industrial scale across cities and towns in the United Kingdom for decades. Very similar to the Epstein files, for decades. However, if we're looking at all of this, how is justice being applied? Here in the United Kingdom, what we're actually witnessing is a cover-up. What we're witnessing is justice not being applied at all. So the very tools and the institutions, the judicial system, unfortunately, is failing the British people. And justice is not being applied. Why is justice not being applied? Because truth has stumbled in the streets, and we have a secular humanism, postmodernism that has infected our judicial system, along with political correctness that, to be honest with you, sacrificing the innocence of these girls is the altar with which these girls are being sacrificed. It's absolutely disgusting. Okay. It's been a tremendous cover-up, not just through the judicial system, but also through the media. I don't know if you are aware of this, but there has been an inquiry. Our government has not endorsed this. It's something that's been endorsed by Rupert Lowe, and he's the founder of Restore Britain, and he's the one that has fronted this thing. And when you hear some of the stories, you wonder, oh my God, how wicked people can actually be. How wicked is absolutely unbelievable. What is happening and what has happened over the last 20 to 30 years. We have seen the British establishment cover. So sad. cover up these crimes for decades. We're not just talking about the fact that these gangs have been running around with impunity. The more disturbing thing is that politicians, the judicial system, social services have all colluded in covering up this shameful crime. But here's the thing. The question is, what are we going to do about it when we begin to see these levels of pedophilia rise its ugly head here in the United Kingdom? But anyway, here's a clip from Trevor Phillips talking about this particular scandal.
What's coming together here is a really horrid combination that nobody really ever wants to talk about, which is the intersection of race and sexual predation. We're talking about a few children, maybe a dozen. Here, we're talking about tens of thousands. This is industrial. Difference with this grooming gangs thing is that everybody knows. It happens in public, is that these people know that they are protected. They're protected politically. They're protected by social workers. They're protected by local police.
Hey, it's me again, Otis Pinnock here. Here we are discussing kingdom justice and discussing the implications of this gross crime that's taken place over the last 20 to 30 years here in the United Kingdom, and probably even longer. Because even though we're concentrating on the grooming gang, Britain has had its issues with pedophilia for a very, very, very long time. And powerful people have been involved. I don't know what else to say. But justice doesn't appear to be having had. But I'm going to tell you this much. That's about to change. But before I get into that, let's listen again to some of the findings that took place in the recent inquiry of the grooming gangs. It's truly horrifying, truly terrible. And it's to our shame that we've allowed this to go on for so long.
The latest testimony from the independent grooming gang inquiry could have come straight out of the Epstein files. That was Sammy Woodhouse. She's a survivor herself, and she's made it clear that there wasn't only grooming and sexual abuse going on.
Parents were threatened with fines and arrest if they continued to try and safeguard their children. Whistleblowers were targeted, threatened, and silenced.
As children, they were told that they were child prostitutes and that there was no abuse serious enough to intervene.
Years later, they were told by professionals they must take medication or their children could be removed from their care. If they spoke publicly, they would lose custody. Victims were told they are too damaged by their trauma to care for their own children. They were then removed and placed into the care system and trafficked.
And so the same system that refused to protect them then punished them for surviving. Some survivors describe how those men were recognised not as rapists, but as fathers.
Rapists had been invited into the lives of the victims' children. Children born from their crimes were forced into contact and custody with the men that raped their mothers by social workers and the family courts.
Because apparently, being a rapist, a child rapist, isn't a disqualifying factor.
The scale of institutional failure. Warning signs were there, reports were made, patterns emerged, DNA ignored, and evidence destroyed. Children in care were written off, raped by staff, and sold onto gangs.
This inquiry isn't just about what the abusers did. It's about what institutions enabled, empowered, and are still allowing.
Files were closed. Opportunities to intervene were missed or avoided. Police officers abused and raped the children and handed them back to the men that raped them, while social workers looked the other way. Some did not survive their exploitation: suicide, substance abuse, and murder.
So the police joined in raping the children. The social services referred to the children as child prostitutes. And then the family courts came along and gave the rapists more children. Do they seem like the good guys to you?
To the survivors, you were children. You were not to blame. You were failed. This country should have protected you, and it did not.
Wow. You've heard some terrible things. But the truth of the matter is, over here in the United Kingdom, there has been a media blackout. Unless you're on social media, you would never know of this inquiry and the findings of this inquiry. And that asks questions. What is going on here in the United Kingdom? And let me just say this to you. Even though that's what's happening over here, you have the release of the Epstein files. What is happening to the people that perpetrated these crimes to these young women? Epstein, yes, there's one. What about the rest? What about the rest of the people that have resigned recently? Their names are implicated. Why hasn't there been justice? As we're gonna answer that question, if we're honest, the reason why these crimes were allowed to go on for so long, and the reason why we're struggling to see justice, is simply because of corruption, high-level corruption that is resulting in cover-ups and resulting in collusion with the media, with higher-ups in the government. Unfortunately, it is a sad state. Justice appears to be so elusive right now. Very, very much like the prophetic critique that we read about. Very much like the prophetic critique that Isaiah mentioned in his time with his civilization. The question is, what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about it? Are we going to partner with God to make sure that our countries, our nations, our cities are more just? Or are we just going to allow this corruption to continue? And I say to you, we need to do something. I'd like to invite you to become part of what we call our Kingdom Justice Movement, where we are going to start doing stuff about this, do something about it, and to call our elected officials and our judicial systems to account. Truth of the matter is this: in the face of such high levels of corruption, the only answer is to call for a reform. Now, hey, listen, the British, my British audience, we're not talking about reform the political party. We're talking about reforming the corrupt systems and the corrupt institutions that we are witnessing, that's simply allowing this level of wickedness and evil to take place, and to hide these things in politically correct language when such blatant abuse has taken place. Something needs to be done about it. And I want to encourage you to go into our website, get in contact with your MP. Okay, we do have a policy statement. We do have a press release statement, and also we do have we've shared the ability so that you can contact your MP, and not only that, but write a letter which is templated on our website. And if you just have a look at our video, it will show you exactly how to do this. It's important that as citizens that our voices are heard, okay? And that we partner with God with the pursuit of justice in our current day. Because one of the things that we've made a mistake on, we've left the systems to themselves. But in the face of this level of corruption, they can no longer be left to themselves. We have to demand the justice. And then we, the body of Christ, have to be prophetic voices demanding justice in our times, and justice from our society, justice from our institutions, justice from the judicial, from the legislative, and even the executive branches of our government. Everybody needs to be held account. And I'm really encouraging you, church, not just to pray, not just to prophesy, to be involved and become a voice for justice in your area and in your nation, and no longer leave it to corrupt individuals. The truth is, if corruption stays, it will only get worse. And we can't have heaven on earth with our institutions so corrupt. We need reform. And one of the things that we're going to be doing for the Kingdom Justice Movement is to call for that reform. So, just coming to the last segment of this Kingdom conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. You know, we feel very, very passionate about justice and justice issues. We're not just talking about the grooming gangs or the rise of pedophilia in our country, we will also be talking about other justice issues as well to make sure that our nations are just, because heaven cannot come on earth without the application of justice, just laws, and the adherence of just laws. We're going to get to this now segment. We're going to look into the prophetic warnings. It's important to understand there are prophetic warnings that I've sent in my spirit, and I'm just going to share them. And I'd ask you to share this with government leaders, whether it's local authority or national governance, or whatever governance there is. You have a place of influence. You really do need to hear this and understand this. We talked about kingdom justice. We're talking about the justice of the kingdom. Earlier, we talked about the frameworks that God has released in his word, legal frameworks for every sphere of life. But we get to understand that there is what is called a heavenly court. Now, most of us talk about Judgment Day, and we tend to think that God only judges humanity on one time at the end of our lives. That is not true according to the scriptures. According to the scriptures, okay, a heavenly court is constantly at play. There is a heavenly court, and there's so many inferences in the scriptures from the book of Job or from the book of Kings. We begin to see that God has a council or divine council, but at times sits and judges the nations of the earth and judges kings and individuals of the earth. I want to understand that. The other framework we need to look at is also in Romans chapter 13, when it tells us that our institutions, our local authority, and our national government have been put in place by God himself. They are ordained by God himself. Paul argues, listen, if you got taxes, pay them. You know, the servants of these government institutions deserve to be paid. He endorses that. Listen, but not because he has to. He outlines what their responsibilities are. One is to govern well. And the second one is to implement justice, especially against the evildoer. We're at a stage in some of our legal systems right now, depending on where you are, that there is no comeback for evils, no comeback for crime. In the United Kingdom right now, some criminals are not fearing a time of jail or fearing any sentences because the legal system has become lenient. Okay, it's become very, very lenient. And as a result, crimes, there's no fear, there's no need to fear the police right now. In fact, they're more concerned about tweets more than anything else. Don't get yourself in trouble, Otis. But the point is simply this: you are there, ordained by God, and you've been given a mandate. Now, whether you believe in God or not, it makes no difference. The heavenly court stands at the highest level of authority. Jesus said, all power and authority has been given to me. And talking about these heavenly courts and convening and judging of nations and cities and people and individuals, I'll say this: a lot of that is revealed in the Hebrew feasts, according to Jewish tradition. Between the feast of trumpets, not to say feast of the feast of trumpets. That's what it's called, to be honest with you. Which celebrate the Jewish New Year. And between that time and also between Day of Atonement, they're known as the days of awe. According to Jewish tradition, that is one of the times that the heavens convene to decide who lives, who dies, etc., etc. One of the things that they do at the start of that particular year, at that particular time, is to get a piece of apple, dip it in honey, and say, "May your year be sweet." Because they understand at times God judges the earth with his divine counsel. We're just going to take one particular framework from the scriptures, and we're going to go to Daniel chapter 4, and we're going to have a look at this, okay, in this kingdom conversation, so you can understand what I'm talking about. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar at the time was the most powerful man on the earth, the head of the most powerful military, economic, political empire at that time, the kingdom of Babylon. Here he is, one of these times, at the height of his glory, at the height of what's going on. You know, they say the Babylonian kingdom was something else, really was something to behold. And here he was right at the top, the most powerful man on the earth. At that particular time, Daniel was a civil servant in that particular palace and served him well. But here's the thing. He had another dream. And in the book of Daniel, you can see he's had a few dreams, but here was one of them. And this serves as a prophetic warning to our leaders and for those who think they're going to escape heaven's justice. You might escape earthly justice, but you will never escape heavenly justice. Here's the thing. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me, he said. These are the visions I saw while lying in bed. I looked, and there was before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky, and it was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and its food for all. Under it, the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From it, every creature was fed. And in the visions, I was lying in bed, and I looked, and there before me was a holy one. That's his description. A messenger coming down from where? Heaven. He called in a loud voice, cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots be bound with iron and bronze and remain in the ground in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plant of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal till 7 times pass by for him. And this decision, the decision is announced by the messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict. Verdict? So that the living may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and gives them to anyone he wishes, and sets over them, the lowliest of people. Wow. What a dream. But one of the things we can interpret, we're going to have to do another thing about dreams and interpretations. So many clues between what was dreamt and what was interpreted, but that's not the reason for this particular kingdom conversation. We're looking at God's framework in terms of how he deals with certain nations. Okay. So the king is troubled by this, and he asks Daniel for an interpretation. I'm just, getting straight to the point if I can. And it says here, this is the interpretation. Your Majesty, this is the decree the Most High has issued against my Lord, the king. Okay, so let me back up a little bit and press the rewind button and just press the rewind button and reverse slightly. Daniel gives them the interpretation of the dream. He basically said, listen, may the interpretation of the dream be for your enemies, my king. And he begins to describe. So listen, king, you are that tree. You have risen to the height of power. You are that tree. You are that tree. But further on, as he's beginning to get into this interpretation, verse 24, this is the interpretation. It says, your Majesty. Okay. He says, your Majesty, this is the decree the Most High has issued against my Lord, the king. This is the decree the Most High, and notice the word, has issued against my Lord, the king. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. The command to leave the stump of the tree with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. You hear that? Now, you heard me talk about and emphasize the word decree. Okay. Well, a decree is a legal word. It literally is a judgment issued by a court of law. In other words, we've seen an instant where the council of heaven has deliberated over King Nebuchadnezzar and found him wanting. And then a decree, a judgment, a verdict from this court is released. And you can read the rest of Daniel chapter 4. That's exactly what happens. He loses his mind for 7 years, and his body goes through changes, and he lives like a wild animal for 7 years, 7 whole years, until his mind returns back to him and his kingdom is restored back to him. And when you read the writings of Nebuchadnezzar, he begins to acknowledge that there is an authority up there in the heavens that he himself is subjected to. And heed the warning. This is a warning for all you leaders. Hear this. Until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth. In other words, I don't care if you're atheist. You sit under God's authority. You sit under his jurisdiction. And if you are wise in this season, you better act like you do. Because if you don't, the same measuring line that was measured over Nebuchadnezzar, the same plumb line that was measured will be measured against you. And if you are not too careful, you will fall. You will go. And that which has been given you will be taken away. At the very least, under Nebuchadnezzar, he was able to be restored until he learned his lesson. For some leaders that I'm speaking to right now, you are not going to have that option, because you've been given time to repent and you haven't. Heaven is watching. Heaven is watching. Got to remind you in this prophetic warning, the person standing at the highest level, it's not you, it's God himself. And the question you have to ask, and the question we all have to ask in our nations, our cities, do we measure up? And if we don't measure up, then what are we going to do about it? And it's important, church, that we get involved, not just through prophesying, not just through intercession, but we get involved in the justice issues of our day and do what's right. That same prophet wrote instructions to a backslidden nation and gave instructions in terms of what the Lord really wanted. He said, do good, do justice, because that is what is being measured right even now. Measured. And if we don't measure up, then we are going to be under seasons of justice, seasons of discipline, until we do. I hope you've enjoyed this kingdom conversation. Slightly different, way different, way different than all the kingdom conversation that we've had. Get involved in kingdom justice. Side with the Lord on the things he loves and the things he hates. Love what he loves, hate what he hates. Let's be a prophetic voice to our institutions. Let's demand the reform that is necessary to have a more just society. And part of our mandate, church, is thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And that will be done through justice and righteousness. Thank you so much for listening to this Kingdom Conversation. Please let me know what you think. And please don't forget to subscribe, like, and even share this message to as many as possible. All right, take care. Until the next Kingdom Conversation, God bless. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining today's Kingdom Conversation. If this episode blessed you, inspired you, or challenged you, share it, subscribe, and invite someone into the movement. Connect with us on all platforms. Facebook, Instagram, and X at City Building 20, YouTube at CBI TV 312, and on TikTok at CBI 9309. For resources, training, and updates, visit www.citybuildinginitiative.org or email info@citybuildinginitiative.org. Until next time, keep building, keep reforming, and keep representing the kingdom.